Let's go, Rider Nation.
I'm ready. I'm ready. Yeah, here we go. It's a feeling now. Hit 'em high, hit 'em low, 'cause we're dealing now. Everybody's giving it all they got, 'cause we're ready.
This is the Piffles podcast, your Saskatchewan Roughriders fan podcast. Thanks for joining us here this week as we get ready for the final week of the CFL regular season. As always, you got me. I'm Alex.
I'm Steve.
And I'm struggling to talk right now thanks to a great Thunder victory in Saskatoon. Suck it, Jeff.
Jeff specifically.
Which
Especially him.
Is there a specific Jeff here or just Jeffs in general?
Well, Jeff's in general can, but I mean other Steve on this one. After his hilltop defending on my show.
That was a hell of a PFC final between the Thunder and Hilltops. So congrats go out to the Thunder, of course, to the Hilltops as well for another fantastic season. But Thunder getting the best of them in the playoffs.
Well, iron sharpens iron. Like that's one thing about the Hilltops Thunder games, and Coach Scott McCauley of the Thunder said it himself after that last game where they went up to Saskatoon, and he admitted like Saskatoon fed the Thunder their lunch. They knew they had to come back, get better, and they just got better every game until this game against the Hilltops, where they had to perform. And now we get to do it all over again against Okanagan Sun. So.
And that's going to be here in Regina at Mosaic Leibel
Field
on
1
Sunday.
o'clock on Sunday. So winner of that goes to Canadian Bowl this Sunday.
Yep, that should be a good one.
That's going to be another good one too. Yeah.
So in that one, even if you're a Saskatoon Hilltops fan watching this, you got to cheer for the Thunder in this one. Go Sask, right? So go Thunder. Well, you can give us a follow on X. Social media at PifflesPod. You got me at RealAlexD.
And you'll find me at Safamod.
And as always, I do not need nor want your pity follows at Greg on Sports.
Check us out on Facebook as well. And of course, the website, pifflespodcast.com. Thanks for listening wherever you get your podcasts, watching on YouTube, watching on SaskTel Max TV on demand. Thank you very much. And of course, Piffles Podcast, I like that sound, is brought to you by Dairy Queen on Elphinstone Street and Sask Drive in Regina. Well, not a lot to go off of this week for the Riders, of course, having the bye week last week, so no game for us to recap. But instead, we're going to do things a little bit different. We're going to go back a little bit more in time and look at this year as a whole. So let's get right to it. It's time for the opening kickoff. Caught you off guard with that one, didn't I, Greg?
Everything on my screen has been moved around, and I'm like, where did it go? You know what I do have very handy, though?
And also, thank you for being such a big supporter and fan of the CFL and myself personally.
That's always
Why?
at the top of the list. Always.
Why?
So we'll start with the Riders here. We will talk about one roster move. So last week, we talked about on the show where they released a bunch of guys off the practice roster. Well, one of them is being brought back, and that's quarterback Michael Hires, signed to a futures contract. So for 2025 is what that move is. He must have shown enough in practice that they're like, okay, yep, this guy might have something. We'll bring him back to training camp next year. So we're starting to see a couple of those moves around the league. And I like that the CFL is finally doing future deals like this, because you'd have to keep him on the practice roster normally till the end of the year. Become a free agent at the end of the year and then re-sign him right away, basically. So at least right now, they can bring guys in while the practice roster is expanded and then get a look at them and just sign them to a futures. So I like the CFL is finally doing something like this.
I think it's a very good move. A lot better roster move on this end than what Calgary did this week. I'm sure we're going to talk about that. But yeah, like it's good to offer some flexibility when it comes to these young stars, because you want to have some access to these guys, understanding that most guys' dream isn't to play the CFL, but if you can keep on bringing guys through and bringing up the talent, this is one way to do it.
And when your starting quarterback is getting too close to 40 for my liking, you got to bring in a few young guys to hopefully push them and find that next, that next star for the Riders quarterback or for Riders quarterback.
I hate to start a quarterback controversy. Did you see the article on Riderville the week?
I was just gonna say Rob Vanstone did one on Jack Cohn.
Which is fine, but they talked to Harris about him being a future franchise quarterback, and I'm like, there's a guy between you and him, right?
As
No, there's not.
Trevor Harris is playing some of the best ball of his life, putting up great numbers, leading his team into the playoffs. Hey, let's talk about the third stringer and how he's going to take your job soon. But there's one thing we love here in Saskatchewan. It's talking about the backup quarterbacks. So that's par for the course, I guess.
Player.
So
we probably sell more yard signs for the backup quarterback than we are for Roland Milligan, even though they're still moving pretty good.
There are, speaking of those signs right here, there are 6 left. 6. So we've gone through pretty much our whole batch. So if you want one, throw up. It's election season in Saskatchewan. You're seeing them everywhere. NDP, Sass Party. Throw up one of these on your lawn. That's the way to go. And there are still some that are signed by Roland Milligan. I have a box beside me with all of them. The signed ones are just randomly put in there, and the box, they're all face down. I have no idea where they are anymore. So I'm just grabbing from the top, and hopefully you get that. So there's a couple left in there that are autographed. If you want to get one, $20 or more if you want, because it does go to CFL Fans Fight Cancer. And we can get these out to you. So hit us up on social media, send us an email, pifflespodcast@gmail.com. I'm sure they'll be gone in the next couple days. So only 6 remain, and you might get one signed by Roland. So
It's still
get on that
amazing
right
to
away.
me that our dumb ideas are always our best ideas.
There are only ideas.
That might be part of it, yeah.
It's kind of why we
Do we
started the
have
show
any
in the
good
first
ideas?
place. No,
Just the dumb ones.
just dumb. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's about it for Rider News this week. We'll get to injury updates and all that a little bit later on in the show when we look ahead to this game against Calgary, of course, which could be for first place. But want to look at this season. Now the Riders sitting here at 9-8-1, or sorry, was it 9-7-1? 9-7-1 right now. When you guys look back at this season as a whole, how close to expectations was it for you?
I think I had them
pretty
at
sure.
14-4. I'm trying to remember what I predicted for their final thing. I
You
know
almost
I
went
had them.
full Ryan Ballantine.
I think I had them as second. I'm pretty sure I had them as second. So
I think we all
You're right
had them
on that
top
one.
too.
Yeah, we all had him
Barely.
at least in second place. BC in first, and then the Riders in second. I think we all had that.
I think that's where we all were. So we were right in that aspect of it. We thought Winnipeg was going to take a step back. They did, but everyone kind of came with them. So honestly,
On their way down to the ground, they tripped everybody else right alongside them.
pretty much. It's that race where the one guy falls across 3 lanes and takes everyone down with him.
Yeah, pretty much.
But I liked everything that this team has done. They unfortunately in the middle they had that adversity that they just could not seem to get out of it fast enough. But you look at some of those games, they if Lothar makes some field goals against Toronto, there's another win. That overtime game against Ottawa that they should have won. There's 2 wins right there that puts you easily in first place and puts you at 11 wins. This is a very this team had the talent and they have the mental fortitude to get out of a spin that last year would have ended the season. You heard the fans in the middle of that skid. Season's over. Sid Harris, get rid of him. Let's see what we got for next year. And I'm whoa, guys, we're still in second and third place here.
I like that you mentioned the next year part of it, because the one thing I love that came out of this season was that through all of the injuries and disasters through that stretch, we got to look at a lot of guys who stepped up and owned their place on the line. You look at our entire offensive line. What did we go through? 12, 13 different starting O-linemen?
13 O-linemen
Right.
address this.
So,
year.
just that alone, and to see Trevor Harris still standing at the end of it. And it's amazing to me that we have managed to succeed both in this year and for a move to build to the future. And look at some of those young guys that are now potentially the anchors for that offensive line and this team as a whole.
Well, and you talk about that, and I wrote about that actually just this past week, talking about how the Riders are walking the walk. Everybody talks about next man up and how that's the anthem, right, for sports teams. Oh, next man up, next man up. Everyone's got to be ready. And I know backups are a backup for a reason. They're not as good as the starters, generally speaking, right? But this team has shown that they do have that true next man up mantra, and kudos have to go out to start at the top. Like, it's got to go to Jeremy O'Day as GM, Kyle Carson, assistant GM, and this entire scouting group. Like, they've found some very, very good players. And Steve, you talk about the O-line. The injury list on the O-line, 4 starters: Philip Blake, Ryan Sevier, Peter Godber, and Jamarcus Hardrick. Those are, I mean, all-stars. Those are former all-stars. And we're going to go pretty much through the playoffs without any of them. Maybe Peter Godber, we'll see. We'll talk about that in a bit. But 6 right tackles when you had Hardrick, Jacob Brammer, Nick Jones, Brandon Council for 1 game. Logan Ferland did it for a game, and Trevon Tate. And now we've finally found, our right tackle in Trevon Tate. And then when you see a guy like Noah Zer come in, and I know we were all worried about, okay, well, it's his 3rd year or 4th year. He's bounced around the league with a couple teams. Is he ready to go? And I thought he performed admirably. So the depth that this team has found, especially up front to me on the O-line, and again, kudos to the coaching staff as well, to Corey Mace, Edwin Harrison. I can't sing his praises enough for what he's done with the O-line this year. Like, it's just been a fantastic job. And we've screamed for depth over the last couple of years, and all the fans have, honestly. And we finally have it. Defensive line, same thing. Lanier, Malik Carney missing a whole bunch of time. All of a sudden, Baldonado gets a lot more playing time. Looks great. Brian Cox Jr., of course. And then injuries with Albright and Charbel DeBeer, who is going to have a big impact on the team with the ratio, and he was looking good to start the year as well too. So what they've done has been absolutely fantastic. So the whole next man up thing has absolutely it's blown me away this year, because teams talk about it, but very few can back it up, and the Riders have this year.
And
I'm really glad that you mentioned Trevon Tate. We should all give a personal thank you and a shout out to Dave Dickinson for cutting him earlier this season, because we've been looking for that that anchor on the right end of the line since 2022. So thanks, Dave. One of many of your bright moves this season. We appreciate it here in Riderville.
But it's not just that. Like, you look at the moves that J.O. has made during the season. He's brought in some very good talent, including Tate. Was it Marion he brought in?
Benoit Marion was just brought in, yep.
Just brought in. He had a great game his first go. Like, he's who's the guy we brought in from Edmonton, the linebacker that told Chris Jones off?
Aubrey Miller Jr.
Aubrey Miller Jr. He's been playing very well too. Like, he's kind of the island of misfit toys. Other teams say, now these guys aren't good or we don't want them, and we've brought them in and we put them together. Like, it is like Raquel Armstead, another good example.
Yep.
Ottawa cut him. Like, it was obviously, he had talent, and we're basing this on like a game and a half, but still, like,
yeah. But look where Ottawa's gone since they cut Raquel Armstead.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's the glue or anything, but he's
definitely not the glue. He was definitely the sandpaper.
They've been awful without him. So,
like, everyone loves crapping over J.O. and some of the moves he's made, and I don't agree with every move he's made, but he's made some very smart moves both last offseason and during this season. He hasn't just stood pat and let this team struggle. He's went out and found talent that he believes that could make this team better.
between the hiring of Coach Mace and what he's done with this roster as a whole, Jeremy O'Day has absolutely earned that 3-year extension that he got this past offseason. He's done a fantastic job of building a solid roster from top to bottom. So say what you want, but kudos to the man.
And then go to the receiver room. Of course, Keyshawn Johnson, Dante Myers stepping up. Of course, Myers being hurt lately, but Keyshawn really showing up to be one of the top 2 targets now for this team. And then the draft picks this year. Del Duncan Busby, a Joe.
I love the fact that we just joke. It's like, we do not need another Canadian receiver. Why do you keep undrafted receivers? And every guy he brings in is good.
So, I mean, honestly, when you look at it, when you have MLS, KSB next year, when Duncan Busby and a Joe are healthy, like, you can start 4, which is crazy to me in the CFL. 3 for sure, with maybe 1 as a rotational guy and a backup or whatever. Like, because if you still have Mitch Picton,
you're probably Picton on the roster. I think. Like,
this team is so deep there with Canadians, young Canadians in the receiving group, that maybe next year we start seeing them, go after a different position. Maybe for the next couple of years, we'll go after a bunch of safeties or something. Who knows?
But on the flip side, if they do draft a Canadian receiver, just go out and get their jersey now. Just do it. Probably going to work out well for you.
Yeah, with what they've been able to whip out there with receivers. Yeah, I agree with that.
But can I ask a favor of Jo though? Start drafting shorter names. A Jojo, perfect. Duncan Busby, too long. I just got my daughter a Keon Schaefer Baker one. I couldn't get the heat press. I have to spend for the actual stitch because his name is too long.
That might be coming from up top. They might be specifically drafting.
Yeah, draft all the hyphen names so that you have to spend more money on the bloody rider store.
Isn't there a guy on the Thunder right now with a first name, last name the same? Is it the Thunder?
Oh, Sadiq, the all-star running back. Yes.
Yeah. Should collect those as well as the hyphenated name.
Best name on the Thunder though, Tiki Zeus Umbach.
That's a good football name.
Umbach?
Yeah.
I like that. That is an all CFL name if he makes the big show.
And looking back to this whole season as a whole, when I look at it, I look at their record and it's kind of where I thought they would be. I just didn't think they'd get there the way that they did. I thought that going into the season, the first third of the season, we might be 2-4, start to find your footing a little bit after a couple, and they very well could have been with how close some of those games were. But to be 5-1 just blew my expectations out of the water to start. And maybe they set the bar too high, because then I expected, wins. And then we had that losing streak, winless streak, I should say, because there was that tie, of course. So the record itself doesn't surprise me, but it's how they got there that kind of did. I thought they'd start picking it up in the second half of the season or in the middle part of the season. And that's when, not that the injuries are the be all end all excuse there, because there was plenty of coaching decisions. There was field goals and just execution, drop balls everywhere that attributed to those losses. But they were in every single game. Even the game, their biggest loss of the year was 11 points to Edmonton. And even that game, we were winning going into the fourth. And then Javon Leake just went off for long touchdown runs. So this team has been in every single game, which is what I expected was a better effort put out by the team. And they've done that. But to have a shot in the final week of the year at first place, I did not imagine that. So
I pulled up our records, by the way.
Regardless of what happens at the end of this week with Winnipeg and Montreal and then us here against Calgary, to me, it's a very successful regular season. I think they've found a lot of talent. They've clearly bought into what Coach Mace has been selling. And we were parading around with Corey Mace as the hire to begin with, and he's proving everything right. So the way that this team is trending right now, of course, back up with 4 straight wins going up into the playoffs. This is the hottest team in the CFL right now. And You always want to be playing your best ball at the end of the year. And right now there's two teams that are doing that, and that's Toronto and us. And those are the two teams going into the playoffs, regardless of, where they finish in the Riders' case, that I'm worried about in the playoffs. When you have your quarterbacks playing at a level that both Harris and Chad Kelly are playing at, I mean, you're probably in pretty good hands into the playoffs, and you're going to be a very tough out, which is exactly what I see this team being. And I don't know. It's hard to say that the season is a success when the season isn't even over yet. And of course, everyone's always going to say either you win or you lose, right? And that's how you determine the success. It's been a very solid first year of this new regime for the Riders.
So anyways, I pulled up our stats, pulled up our predictions. We all had BC in first in the West. I had 14-4. Steve had 13-5. Alex, you had 12-6. I had Winnipeg in second for BC. Yep. I had Winnipeg in second, but I had them tied with the Riders both at 11-7. And Winnipeg would have held the tiebreaker. Steve had 12-6 for the Riders, 10-8 for the Bombers. Alex had the Rough Riders at 10-8 and Bombers in fourth, and Edmonton in third place.
Both at 9-9. And when we go back to that first third of the year, remember when the Riders were 5-1 and the Bombers were 2-4?
Oh, I missed that.
My bold prediction of the year was Winnipeg missing the playoffs completely. Man, I missed that time of the year. That was awesome.
I'd like to go back to when Winnipeg's no longer needed in the CFL season. That'd be delightful.
All I know is if Calgary wins this weekend, my prediction for their record's gonna be exactly right. I don't want that to happen.
No, we do not want that to happen.
I've said it several times, though. There would be nothing more Saskatchewan than Winnipeg losing on Saturday afternoon and the Riders to blow it Saturday night. That's just. 100%. I mean, we all grew up on this team. There is something different about this version of the Saskatchewan Roughriders, but that is still peak Saskatchewan. To have that chance and just to pee it away.
Oh, and it'll be a dumb play too. Like it'll be like a return for a touchdown too.
A little miss on a rouge again, or something stupid. Just the worst thing that could possibly happen. Of course it would, right? Not going to happen though. But we'll talk about predictions here in just a little bit. But really, there's not much else to go off of. Just with the final bye week, I wrote about it. I was actually really surprised how much the team got out into the community last week on the bye week. It was great to see. Like they were out in Swift Current, Moose Jaw for hockey games. There was events in Saskatoon, some in Regina as well too. Like the team was getting out everywhere, and it was like Trevor Harris was going out, and KSB and Sam Emelis, AJ Ouellette. Like it was big time players. And to stick around in the bye week, I know most players stayed here during the bye week. Some players went home. I know Roland Milligan went home. Of course, his home's in Florida and was right in the path of the hurricane, right? So everything's good on that front from him with the family, the house, and everything. So that was good to hear when I talked to him. But these guys stayed here. And they were doing a whole bunch of community work. I figured they'd be, a couple days here and there, throwing in some extra film, doing, stuff on their own time at the stadium. But these guys realized that we have 1 week left. We need all hands on deck to get this win and to get first place. And if we do that, we're in a very good position here. So I think the whole team's bought into that, but they still found a way to do the whole community thing, which over the last couple of years, probably wouldn't have gotten just in terms of when bye weeks are obviously and whatnot. But it's good to see from this team and being out everywhere. They're starting to get back to that whole community sense. And I love seeing that from this team. Okay, well, that's the opening kickoff presented by Kathy Festian of Royal LePage Regina Realty. Let's jump to our Churchill Brewing Company odds and end zones. And I was hoping we get our team nominees before we recorded. Of course, now it's actually going to happen tomorrow. It will happen tomorrow. Guarantee now. I do need to make a correction on this. And it was pointed out a couple weeks ago when we were talking about who should be the rookie of the year. I said Keyshawn Johnson wasn't eligible because he played in the NFL. Then last week I said he could be if it wasn't Trevor Reed who should get it. Of course, got to correct myself. It can't be Keyshawn Johnson. Can't get it. So I got corrected by Britton Gray, of all people. A Dallas Cowboys fan. Man, when you're getting corrected by a Dallas Cowboys
does he
fan,
know?
jeez, man. But fangirled a little bit because, hey, there's Rider Beat reporter listening to us. So thank you,
Well, this is
Britton.
where they get all their best ideas.
All their dumb ideas.
Yes,
Oh,
which are
same
their
thing.
best ideas. Yes.
No, there's no more dumb ideas for that company because they let me go. So they had their chance. They lost it. But anyway, Britton, thanks for bringing that up, though. Just pointing that out. So obviously Trevor Reed, don't think he's going to get it for the CFL. I don't think he'll be the West nominee. But it's a very under the radar position, right? Offensive lineman, left tackle. It's probably the MVP spot on the whole team when you have a right-handed quarterback. So, but anyway, it's
Those that know.
that's right.
And those that vote don't.
Well, hopefully this year they're actually going to do it right. I can't see it happening because we know we're having fun with these Roland Milligan signs, right? We're having fun with this. We know he's likely not going to win. He should, but we know he's likely not because they like going for who was the best offensive player, who had the best stats, and they'll give it to Brady Oliveira.
Always about the fancy stats.
It's still amazing to me when you watch everybody has their MOP watch and looking and seeing Cody Fajardo's name in the top 4 of that list on everybody's list. And I'm looking at it going, how? I mean, he's being eclipsed by a guy on a team that's missing the playoffs by a large margin. Like, if you're going to give it to the best player, Bo Levi Mitchell has been the best quarterback in the league, period.
He got benched.
Take away, yeah,
Which time?
most often benched. But yes, like take away the injury from Trevor Harris and we'd have an argument. But to see Cody Fajardo's name of all people constantly being touted as the guy out east, it's funny to me. And it likely
Steve
happens.
Simmons just called Chad Kelly the best quarterback in the league by far.
He's playing top 2, well, probably top 3 right now in terms of quarterbacks in the league. But he's not by far. Like, he's rounding into form of what he was playing last year when he was the MOP. So he's not wrong in that sense, but he's not by far the best player right now in the CFL. Not even close, let alone quarterback.
But tell me you watched one game and whoa. He hasn't watched a lot of the games this year.
Well, when we talk about MOP and quarterbacks, should Bo Levi Mitchell get the nod from the East? Being on a team that's not going to make the playoffs?
Yes.
Really?
No question in my mind.
Once again, it comes to the definition of the things. If it's MVP, no, because he's not valuable enough. He didn't get his team in the playoffs. That's fine. And yes, I joke he got sat, and to which Scott Milanovic, we dodged that bullet. But what he has done for a team that has not made the playoffs is outstanding. He's been, if it wasn't for him, they probably would be the worst team in the league. His top receiver had frying pan hands this year. Who was supposed to be his number 1 receiver?
Have you seen the Riders receivers for most of this year?
Sam Emlis, I still can't believe he got to 1,000 yards with the amount. If he caught half those passes in the beginning of the season, he probably would have eclipsed like 1,500, if not 2,000 yards.
Sean Bain, everybody had the drops,
and which I get, but we're not saying anything about Trevor Harris being most outstanding player. I think if he didn't get hurt, he probably would be in that conversation. But that said, who else is it going to be from the East? Like, honestly, it's a race to mediocrity coming out of the East.
The only other person,
if you had to give a name from the East, to me, it's Beverett out of Montreal. But again, you're never going to see the media pick an NFL guy when there's a guy putting up half decent to good numbers on offense. But if it's most outstanding, what Beverette is doing in Montreal on their defense, to me, is the definition of outstanding. This should be the first year we ever see a battle between two defensive guys for most outstanding player, and I'd be shocked if we see either one, let alone both.
And that's exactly why only one of them would be nominated. And to me, that's going to be Roland Milligan, or at least it should be, because Beverette will get most outstanding defensive player in the East. They're not going to go two defensive players against each other. They're just not. Even though we
here's the problem.
make the argument that they should, but the only other name in the East that's putting up stats and whatever, and who is going to the playoffs, is Justin Hardy. Now, he's a guy who kind of tailed off a little bit with the team's, last few games, hasn't really put up the stats that he was putting up earlier. But I think I can't put an MOP up there that isn't making the playoffs. When 6 of 9 teams make the playoffs, yeah, you can. I mean, how many of those for Hamilton, all those passing yards? Yes, Bo Levi Mitchell's the only one with over 5,000 and it's like 1,000 ahead of second place. A lot of those, especially at the beginning of the year, were in garbage time. Great for fantasy, great for stat padding. But if he was truly outstanding, a lot of those would have been at the beginning of the game. A lot of those would have been getting his team into position to win games. And they didn't do that. Now, I understand quarterbacks can't do it all. One player cannot do it all in the CFL. This isn't the NBA where one person can literally change a team's makeup. It's way different in football. I get that. I can't say that a guy that misses the playoffs should get an award at the end of the year for most outstanding.
And I understand that, and this is why I think if it is going to be an offensive player versus defensive player, you're going to have all those guys getting wrapped around the axle, going, "Well, we can't give it to Bo because he didn't make the playoffs, so Beverette's the next best player, so we're going to put it against him, against Brady," and that's how they're going to logic their way out of it.
My problem with giving Bo crap for the garbage time points is you're talking about a Hamilton team that has given up 30 plus points per game on average this season. That's not on Bo Levi Mitchell. And I can't believe I, of all people, the guy that he flipped off at CFL week, am currently backing Bo Levi Mitchell.
That's just one of the reasons why I like him.
And yet I'm the guy that wears the Bo Levi Mitchell jersey.
Yeah. Well, we all know why. But you can't pin all of that on him.
No, of course not.
Their defense was atrocious. You give up 30 points a game and you're going to miss the playoffs, period. It doesn't matter how good your offense is. That's just life as it is. And for Bo Levi to still manage to put up the numbers he has, he's potentially eclipsing a Hamilton Tiger Cat record for yards in a season, which I'm surprised it's as low as it is. Into that, was it 5,200 range?
Danny
but think
McManus
about where he'd be if he wasn't benched.
Interceptions.
Yeah, if he wasn't benched, and if he didn't basically spend the first 3 weeks throwing to Tim White when he couldn't catch a cold. It'll be an interesting next couple of days when we hear the team and league nominees. But
now I will say one more thing on this before we go, and why I think it should be at least defensive player. We know it's going to be Beverette in the East against Roland Milligan, and why Milligan should win is the stats. If you look at the stats and the numbers, which is what they'll all look at, very, very similar. Beverette's a linebacker. He's doing it closer to the ball. Roland Milligan is having this season as a defensive back, which to me that might be the most crazy thing about the whole season that he's having. He's constantly around the ball. He's not a linebacker. He's a defensive back. And the fact that he's putting up all the numbers that he is near the top of the league in tackles he's the highest guy who's not a highest total who's not a linebacker. And he's right there with a lot of these linebackers. And to me, tackles isn't the be all end all when you look at it. Yeah, those two guys in Edmonton are having a high number of tackles. Their defense has been pretty bad most of the season. Like tackles, you get a lot of tackles because you're on the field a lot. So it's not the be all end all to me. And to do that from a defensive back's position, just it blows my mind what he's been doing. and he's so quiet and humble about it. Like, he's just, to me, it's outstanding. He's got to be the guy, and he's got to be the guy from the West. Like, I like Brady Oliveira. I really do, and he's having a very, very good season. But CFL voters, come on, do the right thing here. We've seen guys put up these numbers on offense before, and it's good. Don't get me wrong, but you've never voted for these guys to win offensive or to win outstanding player before. Why would you now? So do the right thing. Vote Roland Milligan for MOP. This message paid for by Piffles Podcast.
1 second.
Brady Oliveira, the so-called fans' choice for most outstanding player. But Brady Oliveira had 0 interceptions. Now tell me, is that really outstanding? Roll Milligan for MOP.
That says it all right there. Vote Roland Milligan.
I did,
you
however, notice that Roland Milligan, Brady Oliveira is near the league lead in fumble recoveries. They are his own fumbles, but they are still fumble recoveries. So good for him.
Can't lose a fumble if you jump on your own.
I guess so. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about more of these nominees and Player of the Year awards as the teams announce their own nominees, probably tomorrow, is my guess. But big thing in Rider Nation this week, obviously, the game on Saturday, the final game of the regular season, the final CFL game of the regular season, and 5 p.m. wearing the Obsidians, and I'm looking forward to seeing them again in the dark with the Obsidians because it just looks fantastic. Yeah, I got the hat, you got the shirt. Greg has neither of those things.
I wear our merch.
But everything about this game, Riders and Stamps, and I hate it, hinges on Winnipeg and Montreal earlier in the afternoon. So let's start there because that's where this game, the Rider game, starts, is that game, Winnipeg-Montreal. Montreal last week clearly wasn't interested in playing in BC. They suck going out there to begin with. Cody Fajardo played the first half, Davis Alexander the second half. They benched or sat, I guess, rested Austin Mack. They rested, their starting running back. Like they rested some guys and gave some of the backups very important reps, but you can tell that the team didn't take it totally seriously. Now, they've earned the right to be able to do that because they clinched first place a long time ago. Toronto did this last year as well. That said, do you think Montreal, who now has a bye next week in the semifinals, rests guys here this week against BC, against Winnipeg? Because I don't see them doing that. I see them going almost full on, at least 3 quarters with their starters. Especially with the ass kicking they got last week. They want to win going into the playoffs. They don't want to be limping in and then kind of do what Toronto did last year. Rest guys, have a bye week, and come out flat. So I can't see them doing that this week. And maybe that's the hope in me that they can beat Winnipeg. But I want to get you guys a take on at least Montreal and how they're going to approach this game.
Well, there's 2 sides to that. There's they need to get into the playoffs on a high, so player starters go all out for 60 minutes, get that win to go in. But on the flip side, this is also an opportunity for Jason Moss to flip the Riders one last middle finger for his coaching demise a couple years back. Now, obviously, things worked out pretty well for him moving over to Montreal, but there is some of that in play. I wonder if there's some of those discussions inside Jason Moss's head going, come on, this could be fun too. But they're on a tailspin. They have not been great since Labor Day. They had their big long stretch of wins, and then since then they've been winning tight games and losing a bunch. I think they have to win this game.
Well, if you look at coming into Labor Day, they lost to the Lions, tied the Stamps, beat the Red Blacks by 12, lost to the Argos, beat the Red Blacks by 7, lost to the Lions. So this last third has not been kind to them. I think you're right. I think they need to show that they can have some momentum going in. So if they get up early on Winnipeg, I could see them possibly looking at taking the foot off the gas a little bit and give guys some breathing room. But I think they need to come out, and they need to come out flying. And being at home probably you'll probably play guys a little longer than you would out on that long road trip to BC, because traveling, especially for those big boys, is not fun. So I think they're going to take this game a little more seriously than they did against BC. Spite be damned. Like Jason Moss isn't me. I'm petty more than anybody, and he.
And you mentioned playing at home, Greg, and I'm glad you did, because that's one thing, especially out east, is ticket sales going in, even in home playoff games. You want to have a good showing the week before or the game before to really boost those sales. Now, first place, they probably will sell out Molson Percival. I don't think there's really any worry about that, but you want to make sure you do it right away, at least from a business standpoint. Not saying that should dictate how you play on the field, because obviously those two things don't really go hand in hand, but you want to have a good showing at home for those fans, so that you have those fans back in 2 weeks when you need them the most in the East Final. So I can see Montreal really putting out a strong showing here. And with the way that Cody Fajardo played last week, knowing that he is the starter, even if he has a bad first half, I don't think you pull him. I think you try and let him work through things and try and get better, because he's going to be your guy in the East Final against Toronto or Ottawa. So I don't think there's any resting guys, at least unless the score gets out of hand early or a team's up by 2 scores in the fourth quarter. Then I can see a decent amount of the starters getting pulled. But I just don't think there's any way Montreal wants to go into the playoffs limping in. So I think this is a team ready to go pretty much all in. And plus, they're playing Winnipeg. Everybody wants to beat Winnipeg when you're going up against the team who's been to the Grey Cup 4 straight years. Obviously, you're going to want to bring your A game, right? Still a rematch from last year's Grey Cup. You want to show to them, yeah, we beat you before and it wasn't a fluke. We're going to beat you again, even when it doesn't matter to us. So there's that mantra. So I think that has something to do with it too.
And I think, you definitely want to slap them in the mouth, because as of right now, they are first in the West. They are the so-called CFL simulation favorites to not only win the Grey Cup, but to make the Grey Cup. So, I think you want to basically show everyone Winnipeg ain't it. And so you make a statement in this game.
Now, on the flip side, with Winnipeg, let's say, we'll go to the Riders here. Your starters. Obviously, we know if Winnipeg loses this, for the Riders, everybody plays. It's your starters. You're going out there to try and win this game against Calgary no matter what. We know that, because that gets you first place, right? If Winnipeg wins, rendering this game basically meaningless between the Riders and the Stamps, when do you sit your starters? Because you're preparing your starters to play this week. You have to. If you're Corey Mace, you can't say, oh, well, there's a chance that Winnipeg wins, so we'll give some more reps to Shea Patterson in practice. No, it's Trevor Harris getting all the number 1 reps. So if Winnipeg wins this, you guys can play coach here. When do you sit some of the starters, guys like AJ Ouellette and Trevor Harris?
I think you look at getting them through halftime and maybe start pulling guys out of the beginning of the third quarter. You start moving a few guys through and hope you have most of your starters out by the fourth. I don't think you do a wholesale change at halftime, but I think you start rotating guys a little more, giving guys a look at other spots, things like that, just to keep it interesting. But you don't play them more than a half unless you absolutely have to. Let's get into the playoffs healthy at that point.
I think it's going to be situational. If you play, you get up quick. Maybe you roll out Patterson a little earlier than you want to, but yeah, I think you want them to have a solid half in because you also want to carry some momentum into the playoffs. You want to make sure your guys aren't rusty. Yeah, they got a quicker turnaround than you would if you had the bye, but you also want to avoid injuries. Like we keep on saying, we've got an old quarterback who's playing the best game of his life right now. Last thing we need is a Kevin Glenn situation to happen to us.
Yep, absolutely. Now, with that said, the Riders are starting to get some bodies back healthy, which is great to hear. We've seen that over the last couple of weeks, coinciding with them, winning the last 4 games. Peter Godber, and this is just going off the first day of practice. Peter Godber was limited. Reichwell Armstead was limited as well too. Who else? Malik Carney as well was the other kind of big name that was hurt before. KSB and Malik Straker were all limited as well too. But if you can get Carney back, Godber as well too. I don't expect Godber to be this week. I think it might be for the playoffs. But they are starting to get healthy. But speaking of Godber, and we've been wanting to try and find a way, how can the Riders get Armstead and Ouellette on at the same time? Probably not going to happen this week. That's my guess. But going into the playoffs, you want to try and have Armstead and Ouellette. Let's say everybody who can possibly play is healthy. That means Peter Godber as well. Now, how do you guys work the ratio to get Armstead on with Ouellette? Because you have to take an American off. More than likely, that would be Jacob Brammer at right guard, right? And then you start Peter Godber at center and move Ferland out to right guard. Now, I think we can all agree that's probably the way that you can get them both on the roster, correct? Because you got to take out an American, so that's Jacob Brammer, right? Makes the most sense?
That's the easiest way, but once again, you're doing that for your running game while hurting your offensive line. Possibly hurting your offensive line.
And then you guys can see the question. I have it written in our document here. Do you sacrifice the offensive, and I put sacrifice in quotes. Do you sacrifice the offensive line play for the ratio? Because that offensive line with 3 Americans, I mean, that's when they started winning, was when we started putting 3 Americans on that O-line. But you can't put Ouellette and Armstead on, which ideally you want to probably have both of them on the roster. Do you sacrifice that O-line play if you're the coach?
I don't think there's a situation where you put Peter Godber back at center and you consider it a sacrifice. Because you're getting him in his natural position. You're moving Logan Ferland out to guard where he's better suited. And you're opening things up in that middle. I don't think it's as much of a sacrifice positionally as we might see. Now, there is some chemistry issues because these guys have worked very well together for several weeks now. And that does factor in, especially on the O-line. That's probably the one position that matters the most. So it's a tough battle, but positionally, you have to get Godber on the field if he's healthy. He's a solid to top 3 center in my mind, and it allows you to get Logan Ferland out to the inside into guard, and it just opens things up a lot more. They have to do it, so if it's a sacrifice, you make it.
Like the only other place where you could argue, and this is just a hypothetical devil's advocate thing, is you take Lacombo, move him out to corner, and sit Fields down. Or you, last game they had Allen in at linebacker because of Auclair being injured. There's not a lot of buffer anywhere else, unfortunately. Like your options are very limited other than the offensive line.
The one bonus to moving Lacombo from safety to the corner is also you get Nelson Lacombo out of safety, which is a win.
To be fair, against BC, he did have his best game of the year, and I was the first. We were going to talk about it last week, the need for an impact safety, but we pushed it off now because he did have a very solid game. So, but I talk about continuity on the offensive line. Well, what about the defensive backfield as well too with Fields, right? You don't want to necessarily change that up and put a guy. And we've seen this team is clearly not ready for Jackson Ford and or Jaden Dahlke to be starting safety. So I can't see how you would do that in the defensive backfield right now. Not when they're playing at the level that they have been playing. So to me, it only makes sense to do it on the O-line. But again, we go back to that whole next man up mantra we started the show with, and this is a good problem to have. When you have too many solid players, that's a good thing. So it'll be really interesting to see, assuming that Peter Godber is good to go, how that does work out. So that'll be something to watch through the rest of the week of practice, I guess.
If a JoJo is healthy, I'd say go for Canadians on receiver. But that is your own. But right now, we only have the one backup in Picton. So
now for the Stampeders, and we'll just do this quick because we wanted to talk about PJ Walker, who will not be the quarterback for the Stamps this week. It'll be Matthew Schultz and or Jake Mayer, or I can't see it being Tommy Stevens. Now, I would have said, and I said 3 weeks ago, what the hell? You might as well just start PJ Walker. He's probably going to be your guy next year anyway. He's suited for the CFL. This is a guy with a lot of pro experience in the NFL as well, too. I would have just started him. Now, he will not play because if he plays, then he can't join an NFL team
for the remainder of the year,
calling for the remainder of this year, which if you're the Stamps, you could just release him, and he could. But then you don't retain his rights, which I know you still want to have that handshake agreement, which usually happens in the CFL. Hey, an NFL team comes calling. Your contract's sitting here in the drawer. We just need your signature on it. Like, we want you back if it doesn't work out for you, obviously, right? But apparently that's not really the case here with PJ Walker.
May I say, Dave Dickinson, as a GM, is a okay head coach. So he traded for PJ Walker, basically magic beans and a provisional draft pick. So Toronto's getting a free draft pick out of this. That's fine. And two negotiation list players who may never come to fruition.
Yeah, whatever.
Which is fine. And yes, the negotiation list has the rule where if the player forces the issue, you have to make a decision on what to do with them. So I don't know if that was the situation with Walker here or not. If it was, that just seems like a weird thing to do while supposedly waiting for an NFL tryout. Yeah. So
he really needed that $400 a week or whatever it was.
I guess. I don't know. So the fact that they brought him up and are not signing him to an actual deal and leaving him on the practice roster, so he's going to be released at the end of the year. All of this does is show the CFL is obviously on PJ Walker's radar, and now he can't be put back on the Stamps negotiation list, and they lose his rights. So now PJ Walker's smart. Now he's got like 9 possible teams going, hey, you looking for a quarterback? You looking for a quarterback? Looking for a quarterback? And now the Stamps are going to be in a bidding war. To quote DJ Kelly, you played yourself, because I have no idea what you were thinking.
There were a solid half a dozen potential options that the Calgary Stampeders could have chosen in this situation. They could have waited with PJ Walker. They could have signed him for a game, released him if the NFL came calling. They managed to choose the worst possible option that gets them zero benefit and cost them a draft pick in the process. I mean, if this move isn't an overlook at the Calgary Stampeders as a whole right now, I don't know what is. And I'm thankful for it, because we were very high on Walker when he was signed. We all said the same thing. Perfectly suited for this game. The way he can run, got a cannon for an arm. He's the prototypical CFL quarterback. And now he's going to be a free agent when teams come looking next year. I don't get what they were doing. I don't understand it. But again, this is Calgary as they are now. They are not the John Hufnagel-led Calgary Stampeders anymore, and thank God for that.
I like the Mark Steven voice of the Calgary Stampeders, play-by-play voice on the radio, saying, well, you bring him in to show him, what the team's all about and welcome him and everything. I'm like, I'm sure this is not the team you want to show him. Because
don't get me wrong, if the Riders
brutal.
did it, you've got the beautiful stadium, the team's
Sure.
on a roll. Like, you pick that guy up at the Calgary airport and take him to McMahon going, this is what you're in for.
But
no, what you do
on
is
the flip
take him to the hockey game against the Penguins, which is on Tuesday night. Hey, you can see Sidney Crosby once a year.
On the flip side, though, if you're PJ Walker's agent and Calgary's bringing him in for this look-see at what he's working with, I'm not sure there's a more easy path to a starting position for a quarterback than currently exists in Calgary. So, from his side of things, great time to come take a look and see what the competition is, because it's not good.
I will say this, though, as a fan of a team that has been known to make third-string quarterbacks superstars, I'm very glad we are not playing PJ Walker this week. Because
he would have vaulted into the MOP rate.
Probably could, actually. So I'm just glad. But anyway, this game, obviously, we won't know. Should the CFL have put both these games, the Winnipeg Montreal game and ours against the Stamps, on at the same time? Because the NFL does this in game 17 of the season, week 18, is, they have their time slots set already, but certain games are played at certain times, so there's no competitive advantages when it comes to playoff positioning or who's going to win a division or whatever the case is. The NFL does it great that way. Now, I get it. You can do that when there's 32 teams, when there's 16 games, or 15 games other than the Sunday nighter, right? So there's a little bit more leeway on that, and you already have your games set for Fox or CBS or whatever, right? But TSN, CFL, and CTV, they could have, TSN and CTV is the same thing, but the league and Bell Media could have done something here, which would have been just fantastic. Should the CFL put these games on at the same time?
The NFL gets away with it because the NFL is a juggernaut that is a ratings beast. They can say, we're moving that game because we think it sucks. They're going to go, okay, thanks for coming on our network. Here's $1 billion. Yeah. Randy Ambrosi tried that. They're like, yeah, let's play reruns of the match game. Like, the league is not in that position. Would it be better for the fans? Maybe, because if Saskatchewan doesn't know Winnipeg is winning or losing, they've got to try. Like, you won't have to worry about, are they going to sit their guys or not, because they won't know. They have to play to win. But unfortunately, the league is not in that much power to do anything like that.
They've got plenty of space to run 2019 World Series of Poker shows. They don't have to worry about moving a CFL game for them.
TSN will just play the 2009 Grey Cup. They play it every year on a loop.
I can't see them doing it. I can't see them ever doing it. And in this situation, I've seen people say that the Riders should do it too. And I'm going, why would the Riders do that? Out of all teams to even think about it, they're the ones with that competitive advantage right now. Why in the hell would they move a game to make it more interesting for TV, but less advantageous for them? I like one game at a time. The rarity that this happens, I wouldn't stress too much about it.
Are you saying that people thought the Riders have the ability to change their schedule?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, there was a post on Rider fans asking why the Riders don't move the game to go coincide with the Stamp or the Bombers game. And I'm like, for one, they're not morons. Why would they do that? And number two, they don't have that kind of power. This is not the NFL. They do not have the ability to make these moves. The schedule
funny
is
thing
set.
is it's not even the CFL's decision. It's really TV decision is what comes down to it, right? Bell Media dictates everything the league does. So,
well, it's not even the Riders situation. Like the Riders, out of all the people we just talked about, the Riders have the least amount of All they do is tell the league, we have stadium time here. The league goes, you play then. And TSN goes, no, we don't like that time thing. Change it. And they're like, okay. And that's what happens. The writers have no power in this. I don't care how powerful you think the writers are or how evil you think Craig Reynolds is. There's no way that's going to happen.
The perfect reaction. Well, we'll leave it there. And I mean, I guess we'll find out what happens at the game. So there's only one thing left for us to do this week here, and that's make our picks.
Piffles picks.
Well, folks, when you write 52% of the time, you're wrong 48% of the time.
We have odds this week.
And Greg, you can actually get to your 52% right.
52%, baby.
You can do it. You have to go 3-1 though.
I'm confident I'll get there.
You're I could get there too, actually. I only have to go 2-2. So I have a good feeling that one of us will.
Bloody Ottawa. I wanted.
right.
I was hoping I could slide in at 2-2, and Ottawa screwed me last week.
What about me? I only have to go 11-1.
Congratulations on your 31-46 so far record. Well, we'll start with
most of it was for the greater good.
I mean, it worked out pretty well for me at the beginning of the season, picking Winnipeg all the time. So a lot of those losses for me worked out really, really well. So doubleheader on Friday, doubleheader on Saturday. We'll go with the Friday games. Both mean absolutely nothing at all in the standings, other than for a couple of playoff teams to not get players hurt. Hamilton at Ottawa. Steve, do you want to take a shot at this one first?
Ottawa minus 3.5.
Hamilton minus 1.5.
Ottawa minus 2.5.
Yeah, I'm taking Hamilton. Ottawa's looked like hot garbage for over a month now.
Yeah, I'm riding the hot hand with Hamilton. I think they need to try to get Bo Levi Mitchell in the MOP talk so they can completely say the season wasn't a complete loss.
I have all mine typed out here, ready to go. So I do have Hamilton in there as well. So Ottawa's playing just awful football right now. They got to try and figure it out, because right now, the way things stand, they're not going to come close to Toronto in that East final. Speaking of Toronto, they're on the road in Edmonton. I will guess it's Toronto by 2.5.
Oh, I was going to go like 6.5, so I wasn't even close.
I'll start it off. I have Toronto written down.
I'm taking Edmonton.
I'm taking the home dog. And there's my one.
There's your one. Okay. Then on Saturday, the two games that actually mean anything. And it's kind of nice that it's the final 2 days or two games, the final day of the regular season that really decides this. So it's nice that it's not done, the day before, and then everybody just forgets about the CFL on Saturday. So this is really good. Winnipeg at Montreal. Steve, do you want to take a crack at this one?
I'll go Winnipeg minus 3.5. Yeah, I'm going Montreal.
Montreal.
We are all on Montreal because I really do think it's going to happen. I really think it's going to happen. Not that this team is a team of destiny, the Riders, but I think for once things are going to work out for us. So you already know who I'm picking next in the next one.
I think all three of us are probably on this one the same.
Probably.
It just matters if you guys can guess the points right.
Calgary at Saskatchewan. I'll say, obviously, the Riders. I'll say 4.5.
I'm going to go 6.5.
3.5.
That's it. Hey. Okay. Yeah.
They think PJ Walker.
Well, I'm assuming they're thinking by looking at the lines, they assume Winnipeg's going to win, so Saskatchewan's going to sit everybody.
Yeah. So I think we're all on board there.
Yeah, we still win by a touchdown if we sit everybody. We win by a touchdown if we pull fans Like if you do that, CKRM touchdown toss, you get to start at quarterback for the second half. We still beat Calgary.
Well, I will take this opportunity right now to do a little Barry Horowitz, a little pat on the back, because I can finish no worse than a tie for first now, since we only have Toronto and Edmonton different. So, Sorry, Greg, you cannot win.
But hey, we both end up at 52%.
I mean, that if that works, then maybe we both win at that point. But final week of the
And if it comes down to total wins, I just like to accept my bronze medal. I realize it was a battle out of 3, but hey, you're still a win.
That meme of the guy winning the medal and then like spraying all the champagne and everything and giving the finger. Yeah,
oh, that'll be
you
me
right now, Steve.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I just realized this might be the way our screens are, how the podium is going to look.
Wow.
I can move Steve lower next week.
Yes, I'll move Steve down a little bit. Yeah, we'll figure something out.
A little rude.
But we'll see how it goes this week with the CFL, final week of the regular season, and then next week the playoffs, and we'll look deep into the playoffs next week.
That Rider bye week.
That's what we're hoping for, is another bye week. So if it is, we'll figure something out for content. Maybe it'll be good content. I don't know. Usually never is, but
it'll be dumb content regardless.
Yes, exactly. But that'll do it for us this week here on the Piffles podcast. Thanks for joining us on this adventure as we talk some Riders. Piffles podcast is brought to you by our great friends at Dairy Queen on Elphinstone Street and Sass Drive in Regina. Special thanks, of course, to Kathy Festian of Royal LePage Regina Realty and Churchill Brewing Company for their support making this show happen. Thanks for listening wherever you get your podcasts, watching on YouTube, watching on SaskTel Max TV on demand. And one more time, gotta say, hashtag Milligan for MOP. Get your signs. 6 left, and a few of them are still autographed. So get those. Reach out to us on social media. This is Ghost Behind Your Mind by Tyler Gilbert.